Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. We're going to get started. Some of us had some problems navigating campuses that we have not been on personally for a while, so apologies for the delayed start. My name is Imad Khan. I'm a partner at Winston & Strawn, and I will be your moderator today with a fabulous panel of in-house counsel to hear about their perspectives on practicing law in the energy industry. We have 3 here already. We've got 1 more who is almost here, so we're going to get started nonetheless. So the idea behind this panel was to have a very open dialogue with people in the room about what it's like to be in the energy industry. So we have discussion topics that we're going to be talking through. But if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or chime in as we go. We've allotted some time at the end as well, so that, any of your burning questions that you may want to wait to ask until the end can be asked then. So the objectives today are as follows. We're going to talk about a couple of different topics, including what it is that our panelists do, how it is that they got there, their career trajectories, and they have interesting stories to tell, so we'll dive into that so we can understand how it is that they ended up practicing the kind of cool stuff that they do today. And then also a discussion on their current roles and projects to get a little bit of a behind the curtain look at the types of projects that these energy companies are working on and how the in-house counsel are supporting those types of projects. And then we'll end with some advice that I'm certainly looking forward to from the panelists. So the first thing I'll do is, rather than me introducing each of them based on their bios, I thought it would be more interesting to have them introduce themselves and talk about what it is that they do from their own perspectives. And now we have 4, so a quorum. No worries. So I will start with Abby. Abby, do you want to give us a bit of an intro about yourself and what it is that you do?
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Abby Farmer, and I guess I'll start by asking, can you hear me? I'm trying to project, but maybe people in the back, if you can't, just like wave or something. But no, my name's Abby Farmer. I'm legal counsel for Shell. I work in our downstream and renewables group. So I think pretty much everyone here is familiar with Shell, but we're an integrated global energy company, and we do everything from exploration and production to mobility to renewables. So, and then is that it, or did you want me to say anything else? Or
We'll dive into it further later.
that'll be good for now.
Good deal. Anna?
Hi, I'm Anna Griska. I am Senior Legal Counsel at Woodside Energy. I work in the corporate group supporting M&A and other projects that are being undertaken by the company. Woodside is an Australian oil and gas company, one of the largest LNG producers in Australia, and about 18 months ago completed an acquisition of BHP Petroleum, which made it a global energy company, acquiring all of the North American and African assets that BHP had.
Thanks, Anna. Trevor?
Trevor Cox, I'm Senior Legal Counsel for SLB, formerly Schlumberger. It's a French company, operates widely here in the US as well as around the world, mostly in drilling operations, fracking operations outside the US. Yeah.
Great. And last but not least, Ruju.
I'm Ruju Basavada. I'm Senior Counsel at Eni US Operating, which is a subsidiary of Eni Spa, which is also a global energy company. And in the US, it has assets in the Gulf of Mexico and off the coast of Alaska. And so as a legal counsel for Eni US Operating, I support the legal functions of our subsidiary as well as other subsidiaries in the US.
Great, thanks. So moving into sort of career trajectories, I want to ask each of these panelists about how it is that they ended up where they are. I have the benefit of knowing all of them and most of their background, so I'll be asking some a bit more targeted questions. But let's start with you, Anna, because you are, I believe, among the group, the most recent in-house counsel transition almost a year ago? Right?
Not quite, yeah.
Okay, so can you so Anna and I used to work together, full disclosure, at Winston & Strawn, so we've known each other for some years. But Anna, can you discuss your transition from being outside counsel at Winston or before that too, and then what is it that took you to this in-house role?
Sure. So in my outside counsel role, I was doing primarily M&A transactions, but also supporting a lot of commercial work for some of my clients, doing sort of their day-to-day contracting and seeing what their operations looked like, and that really intrigued me, and getting to sort of embed myself with them, and being on the phone every day with the president of a company, talking about what he was doing was really interesting to me. So that sort of put the thought in my head that an in-house job might be something I was interested in. And then I think M&A was a really good preparation space for me because it allowed me to sort of see lots of different areas of law. Doing a transaction, there might be employment issues or, financing, insurance, all sorts of spectrum of things that happen in a company come up in the M&A process. So through that, I also got sort of a very generalized background, which made me, again, think about in-house and, what that potential might be. In terms of making the actual transition, what I have come to learn is that the in-house role sees a lot more of the sausage making, for lack of a better term. I work on a deal for 6 months before we even talk about bringing in a law firm to work on something. But I do still get to sort of be in the air traffic control role that I enjoyed about M&A. Seeing all the different elements, bringing the different teams at our company together to push a transaction through, and work on the different aspects that come up.
And Anna, how long were you an outside counsel before you made the transition?
About 9 years.
Okay, and was that always in big law firms?
Yes, I was at big firms, 2 different big firms for 9 years.
Okay. You talked about your corporate practice, transactional, and I'm asking this for a reason because we'll talk about this with others as well. Any disputes experienced while you were outside counsel before you went in-house?
A little bit. The client I mentioned that I was sort of talking to every day had a tendency to pick fights. And so I learned how to write demand letters and sort of learned the language of litigation, sitting in on some calls. So I did not directly get involved in disputes particularly, but understood enough to know where issues could come up and then what, a litigation process might look like from just observing it.
And were you in Houston or Texas market the entire time you were practicing?
Yes, I've been in Houston, so that was sort of led to my staying in the energy industry. I'd been working with Texas-based clients a lot of my career, although some were international and based in other places. But when I was looking to make the in-house transition, it was a very easy sell to say, go into an energy company because I had a background just being in Houston and in Texas.
Did you choose to work in the energy industry when you first started out of law school? Like, what made you? Here's a question that someone had asked Anna, so I want to ask her this sort of in front of everyone. What it is that took you to the energy industry, given this perception, if not in Houston or Texas, then perhaps more globally, that quote unquote oil and gas is going away.
First of all, when I was making the choice, it was a long time ago, before energy transition was a phrase that we were all hearing on a daily basis. But I do not personally think that oil and gas is going away. If we all went out and bought electric cars tomorrow, we still have to make the electricity and produce water bottles. So there's a place for oil in the world. We've just gotten to a point where that's the way it is. There's certainly room for an all-of-the-above approach with different new energy projects and alternatives and abatements that can be implemented, but there's going to be a long energy transition. I don't think any of our careers are going to see the end of oil and gas. So there's definitely still space for talented lawyers to be working in energy.
Great. Okay, so we're going to move on to Trevor now. So Trevor, can you tell us a little bit about your career before you went in-house?
Yes, absolutely. So prior to joining SLB, I litigated at medium-sized law firms in Arizona. We litigated financial fraud litigation, insurance defense, general tort liability for companies. A few in the energy industry, a few in transportation industry. Getting a lot of trial experience was key to the role that I have now, which is overseeing a lot of our litigation, in the US. So really getting that practical experience before coming in-house was really key.
Did you have energy experience as well before you came in?
Mhm.
What was that like?
Yeah, so the in Arizona, there's a couple electric companies, so we represented them in a few instances. But as far as oil and gas, I had very little. It was the focus on tort liability that the company was looking for that brought me in.
So what made you transition from Arizona to Texas and to join an in-house, a very large multinational in-house company?
Yeah, I have a lot of family in the area, so that's a big draw. But also, the law firm life became excessive in time and energy. I was very burnt out. I did multiple trials every year. Some of the trials were 3 months long. I was working hours and hours and hours on end, and so to have the opportunity to come in-house, to be able to kind of take a step back as far as time commitment was a huge plus for me.
And how long have you been at SLB?
I've been with SLB for 5 years.
Great.
Yeah.
And this is your only, I know this, this is Trevor's only in-house position, though I guess one could say you were at Schlumberger for some years and then SLB.
Yeah, at SLB you rotate through positions pretty quickly. So I was over our US litigation and then moved over our offshore operations, and now I'm over our US land operations, including the litigation as well.
Great. I'll ask you a similar question as I did Anna. Have you had to do some transactional work while you've been at SLB?
Yes, absolutely. So, as Anna said, a lot of times we can resolve disputes prior to engaging a law firm, and a lot of those settlement agreements are purely done in-house. So a lot of settlement agreements are basic contracts. When it gets to complex contracts, we do have law firms that help us with those. So contracts with clients, contracts with suppliers, as well as a few mergers that I've been part of have involved a lot of work on the in-house side before sending to outside counsel.
And did you have any transactional experience before you went in-house, or was that sort of your first interaction in that form?
I did have a little bit of transactional experience. We represented at the law firm I was at a few companies that were rolling out new programs that required, revising their indemnity languages, their waivers, different things like that. So yeah, we had helped on those, but we have a contracts department that does the majority of the lift.
Good deal. So part of the reason I wanted to ask these questions is because there are many different routes to obviously, these senior positions in these energy companies. And I think it's sort of interesting to learn, what it is that you've done and how that's translated as you've moved in-house. Next, I'll turn to Abby. Abby, so can you tell us about your career trajectory after law school, bringing you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I think I might be unique among the people in this table in that I started at Shell straight out of law school. So I actually, I went to Arizona State for law school as well, and I worked for one of those electric utilities that you represented. And one of the lawyers there had come to Shell, or had come there out of Shell. She said, hey, I'm supposed to be the head of the summer clerk program this year, and instead I moved to Phoenix, and I feel kind of guilty, so I'm going to give you all the sales pitch. And when I went into law school, I had read this book called Full Disclosure, Do You Really Want to Be a Lawyer? And it was just, I'm being very honest today.
Full disclosure.
But it was, chapters were written by somebody in big law, somebody who's a prosecutor, public defender, that sort of thing. And I remember getting to the chapter on in-house counsel and thinking, wow, that sounds really cool. And it's a lot of the things that you've described. I like the ability to get in on transactions from the very beginning and make sure that they're structured properly so that we avoid litigation. I like seeing the full life cycle of a deal instead of just seeing, single components. I like seeing whatever happened to that contract that was so hard to negotiate. How did we operationalize it? So I decided that I would make myself the most attractive candidate possible. So Arizona State had a JD MBA program. So I said, okay, if I want to do business law, I should learn to speak business. So I did the joint degree program. And so fast forward, and I'm at APS, and this lawyer said, well, I'm going to give you guys the pitch on Shell and their summer clerk program. So I threw my resume at the wall, and it stuck. I was originally from San Antonio, though, so I did still have strong ties to Houston, and So I started at Shell straight out of law school, and I've been here ever since.
Have you had different roles within Shell? Like, where did you start when you first joined?
Yeah, so Shell Legal had kind of the structured graduate program. So you did two 18-month rotations. The first rotation was in our chemicals group, and I was a French and Spanish major, so I said, what on earth am I going to do with this? But it turns out you don't need to understand the chemicals to sell them. But I'm sure the litigators out here are saying, like, please don't ever say that in a deposition. But no, so I started in chemicals, and then after 18 months, I shifted. I was 50-50 in our chemicals department, and then I worked for our fuels and lubricants business. So I did retail operations for all of the Shell retail sites that you see what you think of when you think of Shell. So I did marketing and advertising, and then I went back into our chemicals group via 4 months in Singapore. I was backfilling for somebody who was pulled away on a project, so I did sales contracting in Singapore for 4 months, and then came back and did the sustainability work for our chemicals business in the United States before I took my current role. Deep breath. Before I took my current role, where I am in the downstream renewables group. So I support our hydrogen business. We have a mobility business in California where we do light and heavy duty stations, and then we also have a hydrogen industry business where we build the full scale hydrogen plants. And we also have a corporate venture capital organization where we invest in climate tech startups. We do the minority investments, and so I also support that group.
And how is it that you ended up in the renewables sector of Shell? Was that something by design, or is that something you could do, or opportunities arose?
I really enjoyed the sustainability work when I did that for chemicals. I'm with you that I do think that the energy industry, or the oil and gas industry, is not going away anytime soon, but I think it's more of a symbiosis that how can you make the oil and gas industry more sustainable? And so working with the business to decarbonize our operations was very interesting. So when the role in hydrogen came available, I got very excited about that.
It's a very interesting arena.
Very interesting.
I
Lots going
just
on.
saw an Instagram ad for a car that looks very cool, hydrogen based. Before I move to Arushu, something Abby said reminded me. It shouldn't have to be said, but I will just do the disclaimer of everything we're saying is our own views and not those of our organizations and whatnot. So just FYI, hopefully that's appreciated. Moving on to Arushu, can you discuss your career after law school before you became an in-house lawyer?
Yes, so before I became an in-house lawyer, I kind of had a pretty straightforward path to working for a law firm. I graduated from the University of Virginia, and then I had a federal clerkship, and then I started working for a law firm in DC. My family's here in Houston though, so I wanted to move back to Houston, and the last firm I was at before I went in-house was Yoder Coleman, a litigation boutique here in Houston. And I got great experience while I was there. I also had the opportunity to go to the trials, and I really built my litigation expertise while I was at Yoder Coleman. So it was a great opportunity for me. But while I was there, throughout the experiences I had, I realized that it wasn't the career trajectory that I wanted long term. And kind of like Trevor said, the hours and the grind, I wasn't particularly interested in, but there's also parts of litigation like the adversarial process of fighting with opposing counsel and the discovery and, certain aspects of that litigation that I didn't love. But I thought that if I went in-house, I would still get to work on parts of litigation that I did like strategy and like ultimately helping your business in its case. There are aspects of it I did like that I could do in-house. So I started looking for an in-house position. And should I talk about my in-house?
Please, so you made an in-house transition to, wait for this, pretty cool.
Oh yeah, so I was okay, so first of all, going in-house with a litigation background, which I'm sure Trevor can speak to too, is a little bit difficult. There just aren't as many positions. Because often companies, especially smaller ones, they just use outside counsel, and it doesn't make sense to pay for an in-house litigation. But some bigger companies do. So I was looking widely, and I applied to a position with Major League Baseball's litigation group on LinkedIn. And there was a long process, and I got the job ultimately. So that's where I started my in-house career at baseball in New York. It was right around COVID, so first it was remote, and then I had to move to New York. And it was a really great experience, and it was my first opportunity to see what it looks like to do litigation from an in-house perspective. And so there were 3 attorneys that were working on litigation, but MLB has a huge legal group. So there are tons of attorneys working in different areas, including a whole group that deals with labor. So I didn't do that part, that cool part. And investigation is another cool part I didn't work on. So it was just really commercial disputes that you'd see at any other company. But that being said, the industry was definitely interesting. But my family, once again, is in Houston. I was looking to move back. And I also wanted the opportunity to do a little bit more than litigation because companies value that non-litigation experience too. So I thought if I wanted to have other opportunities in-house going forward, that would be a great skill to get to grow as well. So then I had a recruiter reach out to me about this opportunity at Eni, and that's how I ended up coming back. So Eni's been my first real energy opportunity too.
And you've been at Eni for how long?
It's been a year and a half now.
Okay, so similar to Anna in terms of the energy in-house experience.
Yes.
Were you planning on transitioning to an energy company, or was that just sort of happenstance?
That was just the move back to Houston, and which, general counsel is going to give me the opportunity as a litigator to do a little bit more than litigation. And so this was the opportunity that presented itself, and it ended up also being a really great team, which is something that I've always looked for in opportunities that I'm going after is who am I working for? Is it a good boss? Is it going to be good for my personal life as well? Am I going to be happy every day going to work? So that was a big aspect of it. That's what attracted me.
Good to hear. Any questions or comments from the group? We can definitely make it a dialogue if you'd like it to be. Otherwise, I have a ton of questions. Don't worry.
I was just going to comment on one
Yes,
thing Ruchi
please.
said, because I really liked what you said about litigation. The transition from litigation to in-house is very different. It's very different. And most in-house positions are looking for labor or contracts. But I also think that litigation is what put me on the trajectory that I'm on. So, if you're interested in litigation, don't think that you won't be able to transition to in-house work, because those positions are there, and a lot of times companies need somebody with that background. And so that was very vital for me at least.
If I can just
Go ahead.
add one other point to that, I have worked with 2 colleagues who have started in Shell's litigation department and moved into transactional commercial roles, and they bring a fantastic perspective because they are thinking 3 steps down the line, how can this go wrong? What, are you sure you want to draft that email?
Yeah.
And so I love having them on our team because I learned so much from them. So if you do have that, it not only does it not block you, at least in my experience, I think it gives you a really great additional skill set that you can offer.
Good deal. Question?
I have a very good friend of mine that left the law firm where I work, and he joined a company. And after several years working in-house, he said, if you ever have a lawyer that wants to go private and work as an in-house, please send him to talk to me or her. And say, why? Because when you are in a law firm, you are protected when you're giving legal opinions because everything has to have assumptions and and this and that and blah blah. But when you're in-house, your opinions are definitive, and your in-house clients are tougher than your your clients in a law firm. So, what do you think about this assumption or this comment? Is it more difficult? So in-house clients are tougher than they were in the law firm?
So I don't know that clients are tougher, but there's definitely more of a need for
Definitive answers.
definitive answers, exactly. I mean, I may be jumping ahead,
No,
but
go for it.
I often, even after, only 9 or 10 months from having done it myself, I get very annoyed when I get an email from a law firm that says, assuming XYZ and notwithstanding any other things that might actually happen in the real world.
It could go either way.
Right. When I get an email from my now, in-house client that says, can we go talk to this other company about a new idea that we have? I have to, a lot of times I'm being asked that in the hallway. And so I have to either be able to give an answer right there or say, I'll get back to you this afternoon and give them a yes or no answer. Like, can you get on that call at 3:00 and have that conversation that you want to have? So I think there's definitely more of a need for, being definitive, being commercial, and having, a view and taking a stand on something.
Well, I think at least I tend to look at it as in there are compliance legal risks where I put my foot down, and there are business legal risks where it might not be the smartest thing to do. You might be taking commercial risks, and there could be very well at the end of the day a very large check you write. And then my job is to make sure that the business is thoroughly informed of what those risks are, how high that could go, and then make sure that the decision is made at the appropriate level. And so, okay, maybe you want to do this, but have you talked to your manager about it?
Yeah.
Anything for you guys?
Yeah, just echoing what Abby said, that if you explain the risks to them, I'm perfectly comfortable making a recommendation as long as I'm clear about the risks. That they know on this side, here's the risk, on this other side, there's this other risk.
Let me just ask Anna a question to close the loop on litigation and in-house versus corporate and in-house. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience? You had this transactional background and depth of knowledge, right? 9 years of practice.
Mm-hmm.
Was it different for you looking at in-house jobs in the energy industry? Was it easy, hard? What was your experience?
I mean, I had transactional background. My trajectory within firms was a little non-traditional, and so I had a breadth of different experiences working in different practice areas, and so I was open to different sort of types of opportunities within different in-house roles, but leveraging that into a transactional role, I think is everyone said, there's a lot of transactional opportunities within a company. So I was able to, say I know finance or I know EPC contracts, I've done M&A, and be an attractive candidate.
Deal. So we wanted to move to the next module of the discussion, and that's really discussing with each of our panelists, what their current roles are and what type of projects they are supporting, so we kind of get an understanding of their day-to-day work type. So I'll start with Trevor, if I may. Trevor, do you want to tell us about what is your current title and role and the types of energy projects that you're supporting, to the extent that they're not confidential?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the senior legal counsel for our U.S. land operation. So I oversee, it's a $3.1 billion business, and I have a team of attorneys that report to me. We handle all the legal issues that may come up. So I have a contracts team that handles all our supplier and client contracts. I have a litigation team that manages our litigation with our outside counsel. And then I have our operations team that handles all business disputes or anything that comes up day to day, the firefighting. What I always say about in-house counsel that is appealing, that I really enjoy, is you never know what's going to happen in a day. We may have some, violation with the FTC. We may be dealing with the ATF. We may have OSHA knocking on our door. Myriad of regulatory issues. We may have a client that's unhappy with some work that we're negotiating with. We may have a supplier that's late that we have to really pressure to figure out a solution so that we can comply with our contracts. And then as far as energy deals, there is a lot going on in new energy. Sustainability is a big goal, so our company has committed to its investors to be net zero by 2050. And there are metrics. Our next metric is 2030, and we're well on our way to that. But between 2030 and 2050, we will have to have new technology. And so we're investing significant amounts of capital into R&D so that we can adjust and we can have those innovations ready to go by 2050 for that net zero. So there's lots of projects that are ongoing with that, partnering with other companies, hiring new talent, lots going on. Yeah.
are you at liberty to tell us about the types of projects?
So I guess I can tell you this one's been in the news a lot. Is carbon capture is a big one, and so we have a working group within the legal department for carbon capture that has some really good things going on.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So what's your role? Let's just take that project, right? What kind of role do you or your colleagues play to support that business?
Yeah, so it's partnering with our business managers. A big issue right now is, we have clients that want us to start performing carbon capture work. Are we properly protected under our contracts to perform that work currently, or do we need to amend those contracts to add the proper provisions to provide that work? So that's, without getting into details, that's one of the pieces that. The other piece is a regulatory piece that we're working on as well, and then also, just the practical business operations piece that they pull us into. Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you. Ruju, same question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The role you have right now.
Yes, go ahead.
That's right.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had a question about the carbon. If you're able to answer it. So, like, what part is your company looking to take over carbon capture, like the entire process, like the capturing, the storing, the transporting, and like putting it in the ground, like the entire process?
No, so we have a piece of that, which our piece would be helping capture and then store, but as far as transporting, that would be separate.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
Ruju, can you discuss your current role and types of projects that you're supporting?
Sure. So I'm senior counsel at ENI, and we have 3 attorneys working for a subsidiary. So even though it's a large, our headquarters, it's a large company, what we do, it kind of feels like a smaller company in a way, because we just handle any legal issues that come up. So we don't have a huge legal department that handles each segmented issue, unlike our headquarters, which has so many attorneys, I don't even know how many. So one big part of what I do is litigation, given my litigation background. So if any US operating specifically is sued, or one of the subsidiaries that we support is sued, then we will work with outside counsel in representing them in that lawsuit. So that means from in-house perspective, finding counsel to represent us within the confines of the headquarters policies and our subsidiaries policies, then working with outside counsel on strategy and how best we want to approach this, what's the best way to approach the case. We work with them on discovery because in-house counsel has to figure out how to get all of the documents from the different individuals who may have documents. And discovery is now a huge part of litigation and a really costly part of litigation. So we help manage that process and then settlement or going to trial or whatever that's next. So we're working closely with outside counsel on that whole process. Oh, and we also review big motions or anything important before it's filed. So we get to give our input too. And that's, of course, accepted or taken into account by our outside counsel. So that's one part of what I do. And then now I'm getting to do a little bit more than litigation. And usually, for the most part, has been working on different various commercial contracts for our different business groups. So it could be helping procurement with, like Trevor's saying, we do have forum contracts and non-attorneys and maybe some non-practicing attorneys who work on those, but then legal will get called in if there's a tricky issue or indemnity questions, or just something that's generally more in kind of the legal world. So we'll help with those, and then sometimes we'll have confidentiality agreements that come through before our different business units can have discussions with others and share confidential information, so I take a look at those. And then also another big part of it's counseling. So we have questions about what can we do if XYZ happens, or what are our rights if this happens, or do we have a legal argument here? So reviewing contracts and rules and looking at facts to provide information to our non-attorneys. And also a lot of writing too. Sometimes just helping people and write emails and read stuff. I think that's important skills. Yeah, you develop as an attorney and other business, you kind of take it for granted.
Yeah,
you really
people
do.
aren't doing it as much.
And if I may too ask you, like the types of projects, so for example, litigation that you're involved in or reviewing contracts and whatnot, if you can tell us about, what is the subject matter?
Yes, so we have assets throughout the Gulf of Mexico and Alaska, like I said before. So we are drilling and getting production out of wells and we're not actually doing the transporting, but we work with pipelines to transport our production. So there are various lawsuits that can be filed along the way. So in certain projects, if a project failed and we, based on that failure, thought it was a breach of our contract, we didn't have to pay for that, that could result in a lawsuit. So we could get sued for something like that. There's also some personal injury litigation. We usually have insurance for personal injury litigation, so that counsel's chosen by our insurers, but we still have to help a lot with the discovery process for that. And then it's all most of what I work on is oil and gas related. So like what I was saying before.
Speaking of energy.
Yeah.
And that's it.
It's a wrap. Maybe there's a button. There we go.
There we go.
Keeping the lights on,
Okay, yeah.
right?
But sometimes that
Importance of energy. Yes, exactly. That's good.
specific to what we're like specific to oil and gas. It could just be one of our subsidiaries is negotiating a new lease with its building, so helping them with that process.
Good deal. Anna, same question for you. Types of projects that you're supporting, your roles in those projects at this point.
Sure. So I am senior legal counsel in our corporate group. And what's interesting about Woodside and something I've had to adjust to personally is, like I said, it's an Australian company. So generally we take a regional approach to the legal team. So there's a whole department in Perth, Australia, that manages all of the matters happening in Australia and Asia Pacific. And then I'm part of the international legal team. So we have different groups of attorneys that manage different classes of assets, whether it's Gulf of Mexico, we call rest of world, which is a very inelegant term for anything that's not Gulf of Mexico or Australia, a new energy group. And so in the corporate role, I get to be involved with sort of pieces of all of that, supporting larger transactions that come to the company related specifically to one of those assets, or if it doesn't fit under one of those umbrellas neatly, it comes to my team. So my role primarily is supporting our M&A group as they explore different opportunities, which can be anything from, looking at a lot of NDAs that they want to sign so that they can find out what, different investment banks are selling these days, or, going through a diligence process on an asset in the Gulf of Mexico. Is it something that would fit into our portfolio? Do we agree with the valuation? What do their contracts look like? And helping through that process as it gets evaluated and whether we are going to invest. A couple of the sort of specific and more fun projects that I've worked on. One in our new energy, actually both I think sort of in our new energy space. Woodside has committed to $5 billion of investment in new energy over the next few years. And so one way we're doing that is by building a hydrogen facility in Ardmore, Oklahoma. So based on some experience that I've had in private practice, I led the negotiations on the water supply agreement for that facility. If you think about it, water is a lot of hydrogen, and so that's how that is made, splitting the water, so that was a big input for that facility. And then another interesting endeavor, I think similar to what you were talking about with SLB, Woodside is looking at new technologies and how those could reduce carbon emissions going forward. So we recently invested with another university down the road to fund some research over there to determine if carbon dioxide can be, again, split the atoms and turn it into a solid carbon product that could be reused in a different form. So getting to work on that contract and sort of learning about the technologies that are being developed and researched was really interesting.
Very cool. Last but not least, Abby, same question.
Yeah, so I would say just my current role, I have, I think of it in three buckets. I've got hydrogen mobility, hydrogen industry, and the ventures work. The ventures work is, we have a corporate venture capital organization. So we go out, we do the due diligence on the target startups that we're looking at investing in. If we decide that we do want to invest, you have to negotiate all of those agreements. There's standard forms with from the National Venture Capital Association. But you still have to go through and just kind of help the business with that. And then once you are an investor, helping them manage all the way through to an exit, whether that's via bankruptcy, which is less fun, or an acquisition, which is a lot more fun. And so then you get a little bit of M&A light if it is a true acquisition. You're negotiating a stock purchase agreement, and maybe the numbers are a little bit lower than maybe some of the deals you work on, but they're still, it's a fun angle to work on. Hydrogen mobility is we operate 7 heavy or light duty stations in California, and as well as some heavy duty stations. We recently announced that we are exiting the light duty market in California. So the decision to exit a market or a line of business comes with a whole lot of legal work. I'm working with our corporate relations team to manage what do we tell the media when they come calling. You have to work with all of your supplier contracts and what are our rights, what are our obligations here. Leases, just there's an awful lot of work to do in that in order to get a clean exit. And then of course marketing the equipment you have. So that's turning out to be very complex. And then on the hydrogen industry side, so we build or are looking to build like clean hydrogen plants. And so under the Inflation Reduction Act that came out a couple years ago, they've created these production tax credits for clean hydrogen, which is defined as having less than, I think, 4 kilograms of CO2 produced per kilogram of hydrogen produced. And so the IRS recently produced guidance on what it will take to qualify for that, and Shell has then they invited comments on that guidance. So it's reviewing those policies and Shell's advocacy positions and what kinds of claims are we making? Are the positions we're taking here consistent with the positions we're taking in the CCS, under the 45Q regulations? And are we shooting ourselves in the foot? And so there's a lot of coordinating to make sure that everything we're doing is it's consistent across the company. Same thing, when we're looking to market the environmental attributes that come with producing hydrogen, can you decouple them from the product? Can you not decouple them from the product? What's the, what are the regulations around that? So it's constantly changing. Every day I go in thinking, I am finally going to get that document done, and then it'll be off my desk. And then somebody gives me, you get that little ping on Teams and they say, hey, do you have a second? And then there goes the rest of your day because you're working on something else. So it's never a dull moment. Lots going on, always something.
Good deal. Let me ask you, so I know you are involved in the transactional side and, looking at potential liabilities if you're exiting the market in California. You also mentioned advocacy, or at least commenting, on the government regulation, which sort of being at the forefront of what policies will be implemented. Is that something that's also in your portfolio that you help with?
If it relates to hydrogen, yeah.
Very
It
cool.
is, so.
Good deal. So, yes, go ahead. Question.
Hello, my name is Sol. Nice to meet you. I practice law in one of these rest of the world countries in Argentina. And in my law firm, we usually talk with a general counsel, senior counsel for companies that ask for our advice. And one of our main challenge is how to say them that they are wrong, but in a polite way that sounds that they are right, because, they control us, they paid our bills as well. How do you feel when you are challenged by these outsiders?
I would say this, Shell, we recently moved our headquarters to the UK, but its origins is as a Dutch company. And if you've ever worked with the Dutch, they're extremely blunt. And so we appreciate the candor. And so I think as long as it's well-reasoned, then I think I certainly would love to be told, you know what, I see why you want to do that, but here are the risks. And to the extent you can say, but here's a way you could consider doing it instead. I think it's that last piece of what, if not this, what could you do? That sweetens any message. But yeah, I appreciate being told, being challenged, because it means that the ultimate solution is going to be better. So.
Totally agree. There's a way to deliver information that might be more productive than another way, but as long as there's a good reason behind it, I think you get the point across. And I work with, extremely intelligent people. They're not fazed by a little bluntness.
Anyone else on that topic? Well, so given that you all work in international companies, and this is the international section meeting, I have to ask, in terms of your projects and the work you guys are doing, domestic versus international, and anyone can take this, you know, but all of you work for multinational companies. Eni is in part owned by the Italian government, and I believe it's a shrinking ownership, but still a state-owned entity. I believe the only state-owned entity at the table right now. But can you guys talk a little bit about, you know, projects that you touch where there's an international aspect? Anna, you mentioned that you're part of the international legal team, and so you say that would touch the rest of the world. And
We really need a better phrase.
it feels like a T-shirt idea, not a good one necessarily. But can you talk a little bit? Anyone can take the mic here. But can you tell us a little bit about, you know, domestic portfolio versus international portfolio, daily, weekly basis?
Yeah, I mean, I can start. You know, Woodside has assets, like I said, in the Gulf of Mexico, but also a growing presence around the world. And so, you know, we are interested in expanding in lots of different places. So I have, you know, I have had projects where I'm talking to people, like I said, in Oklahoma, but I also, you know, have done deals that are based out of London or the Middle East. It really just can depend on what's happening on any given day. But being prepared to, you know, have those conversations, talk to someone in a different time zone is a part of my daily life. With a company that's based in Perth, we have probably the most inconvenient time difference that one can possibly have on this planet. So, you know, international work has just, you know, become more a part of my day-to-day than definitely was in private practice.
Others?
Yeah, I agree. Maybe slightly less. My focus is the U.S. and it's very heavy, but most of our contracts are multinational. We deal with, you know, disputes or arbitrations that are international, you know, between other companies located elsewhere, lots of suppliers around the world that, you know, we may engage with in that way. We have a lot of labor issues. We transfer employees all over the world. So whether it's an employee in the U.S. going to another location or somewhere in the world coming to the U.S., we have visa issues, we have labor considerations. So there's a lot that goes on, and we rely on our counterparts in the different countries as well as outside counsel in those other countries.
And forgive me if I'm incorrect, but I remember like part of your team also sits in other parts of the
Yes,
world, right?
so
not
we,
just the United States.
yeah, that's exactly right. So we have hubs where there are, you know, HR, IT, legal professionals that help. So we have a large hub in Bogota, we have a large hub in Bucharest.
Yeah, and I mean the U.S. part, not obviously
Yeah.
SLP Global,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Rushu?
Yeah, so while my projects are US focused, this is my first exposure to working with attorneys from other countries, so mainly Italian attorneys and Italian business people too, because our US subsidiary specifically gets Italians who come for 3 years or so at different positions, including our CEO who comes through every couple of years from Italy. A new person comes in, gets experience, and goes back to headquarters or somewhere else. And then also we have some attorneys who support Latin America who sit in the US who we work with sometimes. So it's been my first exposure to seeing how attorneys with a different background approach different issues. And one litigation specifically we have right now is with our subsidiary, but Eni Spa has also been named, the headquarters has, and they have their own attorneys working on it. So we've been working closely on this litigation, and it's interesting because it's a US litigation, but their understanding of it is new, and so it's been interesting kind of interfacing with them and teaching them and also learning from their perspective and why they may not understand why we have certain rules that we do. So it's been a good experience in understanding that there are other legal regimes out there, not just US focused. And sometimes I think we just get so focused on what we do and that we're doing it the right way. It's good to see other perspectives as well.
Yep, fair enough. Abby, what about you?
Yeah, I would say in my current role, it's a little more US focused just because I support US assets. My chemicals role was much more globally focused because a lot of our sales contracts, we would be selling, be a global framework agreement. So you sell chemicals to Exxon, but you're selling it to their Singapore entity, but you're also selling it in Europe. And so you usually negotiate like one umbrella set of terms and conditions, and then you have like individual call-offs for the orders or what have you. So it used to be more internationally focused, but now like issues still come up. So we're trying to get rid of a piece of equipment, and it's currently located in one country, and we're trying to give it to an entity in another country, but the shell entity with current title is based in the United States, and so we're trying to figure out, do we need to give it to a different entity to avoid any tax implications of an asset transfer in another country, and then also jurisdictional issues. So I'm becoming fast friends with my European tax colleagues. So even when you think you're focusing on a U.S. project, just because the world's flat, your supplies or assets are coming in from all over the place, and so like you can't help but have an international impact.
Makes sense.
So if I was gonna advise somebody who's been at a law firm or who's in the government, how do you make that jump from there to being an in-house counsel? What's your best advice? Do they apply on LinkedIn? Do they just go to the firm website? Do they reach out to somebody like you? What do they do?
Yes.
All of them.
All of so actually like the process of getting a job, yes, all of those things.
Any other suggestions?
I think, it's the tried and true method is networking. If you have a foot in the door already, it really helps.
Okay.
There's a question over here.
Go for it.
Yeah, so a lot of these Houston schools, I'm sure other schools around the country have a great pipeline for LLM students. I was wondering, these LLM students that are trained and maybe have experience in Latin America or other countries, what opportunities have you seen here in the US for them to, apply or to join in-house straight from their LLM programs?
I don't know if I had seen that specific path, but I have seen, we have attorneys all over the world, and they have an opportunity to come to the US and they'll do an LLM program while they're here, and it's always very, very useful to them. I don't think we would foreclose hiring someone who's done that, and would certainly be a very good consideration if we were looking to hire and they applied.
One more question over here.
Question about, legal practice and new technologies. It's particularly AI, generative AI and machine learning. Do you guys work in larger companies with larger legal teams, I imagine? Are you seeing AI used in your legal practice? Are you expecting your outside counsel to be using AI? And are you expecting law students recruiting to you or junior lawyers recruiting to you to be fluent in generative AI or?
Who wants to take that on?
I've been using ChatGPT. I've taught my
So have
other
I.
colleagues how to too. I think it's important to be aware of the best tools that are available. Of course, it can be used, like you hear about people using ChatGPT to draft a brief and then they just copy paste it. Obviously, you don't want your law firm to do that, but you of course want to get to the answer as quickly as possible, the right answer in the best way, and so you want to use a best tool to do that. So if you can use ChatGPT instead of Google searching for hours, then you should know that that's a good tool to use and you should use it. So I think that's important. And then also for discovery, like I was talking about before in litigation, I know there are experts in that area. I'm not one of them. And I think that I'm sure AI somehow is playing into that and will only continue to improve the discovery process. So I think that law firms will be expected to understand the process as well and be abreast of it.
Well, do you think you'll get replaced by it?
At least my husband thinks so. So he's not an attorney, so he doesn't appreciate our value. But so far, I think the way I've at least used ChatGPT, I don't think so. It helps, but I think you still need someone who's using the information that it's giving you to provide counsel, because there's just so many different answers to a question sometimes. But I don't know, it's getting better and better. So.
I'll also say that I will spend all this time crafting a beautiful email, whether it's I wrote it or ChatGPT wrote it, and I send it to the client, and then I get a phone call that said, "Hey, your email was really long. Can you tell me what it says?" So like, I will always have a job for that reason.
So I think there's some interest from the questions on, I think, advice. So I think we're going to move into that sort of module of it. One thing I want to ask, and anyone can jump in, has to do with some of these key legal issues like AI. But in the energy industry, for what you guys do, either industry specific or not, what are some of the topics that you think are sort of key legal topics that maybe students or lawyers practicing in the area should keep abreast of, or make sure they learn? So AI is a good example of that, and its implications on things like maybe let's say cybersecurity or discovery. That could be an area. Any others that you're interacting with or can think about that would be good to sort of keep abreast of?
I mean, not necessarily a legal issue, but for someone wanting to go into the energy industry, I think it's important to keep yourself aware of all of the new energy that's out there, all the renewables, the new, technologies that are being developed. Whether you're going into an interview or just a meeting or talking to colleagues, it's important to know what's coming next and, not be caught flat-footed when they say, we've got to start operating this new business unit and you've never heard of whatever the new battery technology is, for example. So I think just, educating yourself on what is happening in the energy transition is an important part of being in the industry.
Well, practically, so what would you advise people? How would one go about doing that, for example, in addition to attending this conference this week? Because we'll be talking about a lot of that. But, what are the publications or organizations, you think that are useful to keep educated on those sort of cutting edge issues?
It can be as simple as reading the Wall Street Journal. What are they talking about? Where is the new hot company? Definitely lots of different industry organizations provide great resources on that as well. I'd be
Anyone
else
has
has ideas,
everyone.
One thing that comes to mind is the ability to read financial statements, a lot of, just practical business knowledge on how a business works, what a balance sheet looks like, how that's built. That was something that I learned through litigation and then has been very, very valuable as, kind of the attorney for, right now the area I'm over is a $3.1 billion business, and there's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of liabilities, there's a lot of assets, there's a lot of profit. So being able to drill down and understand in our business meetings what's happening really helps you advise them even better.
I would say another good way to always, to keep what's helped me learn as I've transitioned to the energy industry more recently, just always asking questions, not being afraid to ask questions or taking a couple minutes from a business person I'm working with, like, hey, can you just break it down? Like, what, the basics. There's a pipeline, what is it attached to, and what is this vessel, and how is this working? And that's really helped me learn a lot too. So sometimes you're scared to ask all these questions because then people think that, oh, you're supposed to be giving us advice. But it's okay to spend the time doing that, and then you can provide better counsel.
Yeah, I will say, so I made the joke earlier, you don't have to understand the chemicals to sell them, but I found, I've bounced around a lot in Shell, but it's not until I understand the business, how they make their money, what their value chain is, that I've felt comfortable giving the legal advice. Because if you don't understand what your client's goal is and how they are trying to get there, your advice will not be good advice because it's not tailored to what they need, right? They're in a business, they're trying to make money. If you're giving advice that avoids all risk entirely, well, great. They're not gonna make any money that way, so you haven't actually done your job. So you need to help enable what they're doing. And then just two other really pragmatic things that I would say I wish I had taken in law school. Antitrust and intellectual property, because as in-house counsel, we are issue spotters, and so these issues come up all the time, and so you need to have that radar going because your business partner is gonna be so excited about what they're doing, they might not be thinking along those lines. So comes up all the time for me.
And if law school has an insurance law class, it did not exist when I went to law school, but insurance touches everything. It's very complicated.
No, that makes sense.
I have a
Yes.
question. So I'm actually writing a comment right now that involves antitrust a lot. I'm curious to know, like, what types of issues do you come across that you have to deal with, like, related to antitrust?
So I would say antitrust issues I see, particularly in the hydrogen space or CCS space, it's new. Everybody's trying to figure out what's going on, like, and they want to share the risk, and so companies are getting together trying to work on projects, and so. I mean, obviously, that's like sharing. You have to dealing with competitors and that sort of thing. So, I mean, that's what immediately comes to mind. And so, it's how do you structure a transaction appropriately so that you're sharing the legitimate and lawful information for your legitimate and lawful purpose without crossing that line.
Right.
That's probably the biggest one I see.
Okay, thank you.
There.
The oil and gas patch has always been hot or sexy, a nice place to work, and a nice industry to work with. Do you anticipate that that will remain the case through the energy transition?
I mean,
For two reasons.
yeah.
Of course, it's not, it is still sexy or hot, but it may not have social approval or that doesn't look as good as it always looked. That is one thing. And the other is, am I wrong or right in believing that even salaries or that as the industry turns greener, the price, the oil price, I mean the price of the book gets smaller?
So energy industry is still attractive for people, you think?
I mean, I think that some of you might be able to answer that better because I think that is also a regional, internationally regional question. Like I know my company in Australia, there's protesters outside the office every day. Here in Houston, we don't have that problem. So I think, whether it's attractive might depend on where you are and what the social climate is of, your community as we are, in the beginnings of this transition.
Yeah, and I think ultimately as an attorney at a company, you're focused on building your skills as an attorney. So I think that the skills I'm building would translate to another industry as well, just as they did from entertainment now into energy. So that's also something that I'm always looking at. So right now I want to be in Houston and the job market is, very energy focused, and so this worked out. But let's say tomorrow Bill Gates invested in some technology and it's like we don't need fossil fuels anymore, whatever. I don't think that's gonna happen, but let's say that happens overnight. Hopefully we're focused on building skills that will translate to other businesses as well. And I think
You had a question? Yes, Eva, please.
I have to say, I have my LLM in taxation, so bear with me. But you work, guys, I do mostly international. How closely did you work with I remember the law library in the school I went to, there were, walls of books at the time, just dreamed with extractive industries and the distribution. Do you work closely with your departments? You're all international, so I imagine you have, does the tail wag the dog in your case?
Sorry, so your question is if they're working with,
Work closely with your tax department.
Abby, it seems like you definitely do.
Yeah, it depends on the transaction. If we're a lot of times, like when I was in chemicals and we were just selling petrochemical products, like that was on a template and the sales contracts were pretty well established. So in that instance, not so much. But then stuff comes up where I need to look at it and say, tax wants to be involved with this, and then they.
Because you all have humongous companies. I'm sure Shell is constantly under audit here. Even is it still a UK company? Or?
It is a UK company now, yes. Yeah.
Others? How closely are you working with tax departments?
Yeah, very closely.
Yeah.
We have sales and use tax that are different by state. There's quite a bit that goes into, we work closely with that.
And I think it just makes sense. I mean, I'll speak from personal experience too. I am not a tax attorney and would not like to be one whatsoever. But certainly I've had to come to learn taxation in international, sort of disputes basically, because when it comes to newer energy, a lot of the incentives related to renewables are connected to taxation. And somehow those tax provisions change. I don't know how they change, but they change. And the effect is they don't give you as much money, and so that's where I come in to understand
We're
them.
not going to get a foreign tax credit for the.
Yeah, exactly. So I know it's closely tied. Yes.
It was really fascinating to me how you guys were talking about so much of cutting edge technology, CCUS, hydrogen, and all of y'all have a lawyer background. How do you cope with that? How do you go, especially companies like Shell and Woodside and Eni, who do so much of this in every sphere? How do you, as lawyers, how much you have to educate yourself, and how do you deal with your technical teams? And how much you have to go in depth into the technology to do your jobs?
Yeah, I think sort of echoing what Ruja and Abby were saying a minute ago, it's about asking questions. I was presented with an NDA last week. Someone said, hey, can you review this? And I immediately wrote back and said, sure, but do you have 10 minutes? And I went down and I said, okay, what are you trying to do? What is this technology going to accomplish? How is it going to be implemented? Because you have to educate yourself and get those answers in order to be able to effectively evaluate the risk and give advice.
When I started, I felt like asking questions meant that I was somehow failing at my job because I didn't know the answer. And I think if there's one thing I've learned the longer I practice, it's not your job to be the technical expert. And it's okay to ask questions until you understand the technology. And it's okay to say, please explain this to me because I need to understand it so that we can get to the legal issues. So yeah, I asked the technology folks all kinds of questions.
And I'm sure, you work with engineers, I work with engineers, they are more than happy to talk your ear off about their technology that they're developing, so.
You wouldn't think less of an engineer for saying, can you explain this indemnity provision to me? So, same thing.
Which I think is also true, by the way, as you're outside counsel. Most of us have been outside counsel, with, dealing with something you never heard of, and to be able to, represent your client the best way possible, you sort of have to ask the questions. And I think that's where the in-house counsel come in to connect you with those engineers who wouldn't mind talking your ear off, just so you understand and can hone in on issues that are important for your legal argument. You don't have to know everything, but you do have to know certain things very well, right, depending on the case, so. Other questions? Yes?
So you all work with outside counsel, speaking of that. So what is one thing you wish outside counsel would know when interacting, sending you something or a communication, just one tip you might have for outside counsel to better help the client in their representation?
I would say one thing when you're working with not the general counsel, but just someone below them. One thing I liked when I first went in-house was when the outside counsel kind of made me look good. Like I'd come up with something or I'd offer a suggestion or I'd make edits to a motion and they'd say like, oh, Ruju really, your edits were really helpful, like thanks for doing that. And then my GC's copied on it. Like, okay, thanks, like a shout out, right? And and then you feel comfortable working with those attorneys too, and that's one way to start building that relationship. Because sometimes it goes unsaid, that was a helpful comment. So if it was helpful, might as well just share it. That's one thing I like to see. I'm sure there's other more important aspects, of course, but.
Why don't we just go down the line?
Okay, yeah, I think the one thing I would say is just be brief, bullet points. We have business managers that I think Abby said, normally if I have a paragraph, they're not gonna read it, it has to be bullets.
Yeah, and I was sort of gonna say the same thing. Even if you're giving advice to in-house counsel, give me a headline. The 5-page memo is great, but tell me up front what I need to know so that I can walk into a meeting and give the short answer. I'll read the memo eventually, but give me the answer.
I guess the last thing I'll say is we have a lot of law firms come in and do CLEs, and y'all are the ones who are really on the forefront of what's cutting edge legally. And so the CLEs where you go in, you say, here are the changes and here's what they mean. And I attended a CLE where they digested kind of the key bullet points that synthesized, this is what the IRS guidance says and these are the potential implications. And then you better believe I used that in my feedback to when we were writing our position paper back to the IRS. So those CLEs really are useful and we do appreciate them. And then when you say, gosh, I wish I had somebody who could explain this further or who could advise on this, you do pull out the slide packs and say, who was that person again?
Any other questions? Okay, so I'm gonna wrap it up with just a scenario to ask each of you, and Anna, if I may, I'll start with you. I'd love, some other advice. So for law students, maybe I'll start with actually Abby, if I may, and then I'll go to Anna and down the line that way. Advice to law students who want to go directly and work for an in-house company. What is your advice for that type of objective?
So I don't know if I have advice for the objective per se, because this opportunity to work at Shell fell into my lap and I haven't had to find another job since. So I got very, very lucky, so that's not really advice. But one thing I would say is if you start in-house straight out of law school, go to a company that's big enough to actually train you. Because if you are one of two lawyers, then you're it for the entire company. They're not going to have time to answer all of your questions, and you will have them, and to look at all of your documents until you feel comfortable with it. And so, in fact, my career counselor at ASU actually told me, don't take that summer internship. They won't be able to hire you, and two, you need to get trained. And it wasn't until I explained, no, we have a legal department that's the size of a law firm. That she was like, okay, maybe Abby's not crazy after all, but definitely choose something that's a place that's large enough that you can actually get the training you need, because otherwise you're going to just feel very, very lost and very stranded and stressed.
And there are tons of companies, right? Like
Yeah.
energy or non-energy that have very large legal departments, and it seems to be the trend to sort of grow legal departments to do things in-house. So really good advice on that front. Anna, transitioning for an outside counsel to in-house, or for a law student who just wants to go straight in-house, to the effect you have advice on that front?
Sure. I think in either case, my best advice was learn how to be a commercial advisor, not just a legal advisor. We've mentioned a few times you have to analyze risk, come up with what might be the appropriate option, taking on some risk for your company, but that has to be done in order to progress the business. So understanding that you can't just say no to everything and put your clients in a cushioned room and not let them, take any action whatsoever, doesn't work. So, understanding the business, knowing what is an acceptable level of risk, and being able to advise appropriately. And I think educating yourself about the business and about your industry, whatever that may be, to get to that point is important.
Thank you. Trevor?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, because these are both very good advice, is network. If you have an industry you want to be in, go to conferences on that industry like this, get to know people in the space.
What was the?
Advice for all the advice you have, your last basically.
Yes.
Any advice you have for people who are maybe outside counsel who want to transition in-house, or maybe they law students who want to go in-house ultimately?
Yes, I think like Abby was saying, if you are looking to go in-house, when you're already in law school, that's what you want to do, you should seek out those opportunities at places where they will allow you to develop your skills. But oftentimes there aren't that many positions to go in-house right away. So think about that when you go to the law firm, like what do I want to do at a law firm that will allow me to go in-house? You can go as a litigator, and I think I have great experience that has helped me, but often those roles, there's more of them if you have a transactional background. So just kind of have like that end kind of goal in mind, and try to keep that in mind when you're navigating the process on your way to get there, because there are things that can make it easier, including networking and building your skills.
Anyone else have any questions before? Oh, yes, please.
I've been working in the international field, but nothing to do with energy, and I've never been in-house other than with the United States Air Force, which is kind of the most in-house you'll ever get. And I know their risk strategy. But one of the things that I wondered from the in-house perspective is that for many people working in the international law sectors elsewhere, language skills, other than engineering, science, and ChatGPT, are really important. Is that something that's of value for someone who's thinking about going directly in-house? What role do language skills have in that legal professional community?
I think language skills I've seen at where I am right now are very helpful. People who can speak Italian or Spanish, or you know, if you speak Spanish, I think Italian's a little bit easier, so you can understand some of it. I think that's really beneficial. There's often people having conversations in Italian in our break room, and I think it just helps build that camaraderie. And then, you know, there are translation issues too. We're speaking English to someone who's English as their second language. So if I was able to speak Italian, that'd be very helpful. So I think speaking, especially Spanish right now, is a great language to be learning. And I wish I could. I'm on Duolingo right now. But yeah, I think it's helpful for sure.
I speak Spanish, and it's definitely opened up doors at my company for me.
Go ahead, no, Abby, go ahead.
I majored in French and Spanish because I thought I wanted to work for an international corporation and live abroad, and then they sent me to Singapore where the official language is English. But I do think that it is a plus. You probably need to be pretty good at it to be like pretty fluent. You can get the rapport angle just from trying a little bit, but if you're actually trying to practice in another language, I think you should be pretty good at it.
Thank you.
One question here.